Cool.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Here we are all together once again. And we're going to jump straight in and speak to Nick from the Aviary Project, and his colleague Pamir may join us, and he's in the mountains somewhere in Spain, I believe, at the moment, not too far away from Louis, which is a good thing. And Nick, you are a proponent, and your company, which is about to launch on the 21st of November, I believe, are proponents of urban air mobility. Was there any reason you chose the 21st of November? This is a trick question.
Well, we'd sort of had some ideas of wanting to do it before the end of the year, really just get kicked off, introduce ourselves to the world at large. We found some space, we found some time, and it all just seemed to come together.
Do you know that that's the anniversary of the first manned flight in the balloon by the Montgolfier brothers? That's Montgolfier Day. Ah, there you are. You see, that was the trick question. So
very fortuitous.
Very fortuitous. So you are, I think it's 200, and that will be the 235th, I think, anniversary of the first manned flight. So wow. Yeah, I thought it was very clever. They've chosen 21st of November for that reason. Very, very good. Now, urban air mobility, that's the flying taxi hype of Uber and all the others. I mean, is that really going to be a real thing? You're a very skeptical audience here now, so you better try and convince us hard that it's going to exist. And what good day, Richard, in the comments. What's the Aviary Project gonna do for us in that regard?
So our motto, our tagline, our mission is to make urban aerial mobility a reality, actually. And I think there's been a lot of hype in the word that you use. There's been a lot of hype about what it is, what it can be. And that's actually one of the really interesting things for me, is trying to firstly define what is the benefit of urban aerial mobility and then how to make it reality. So we've heard a lot about the whole aerial taxi concept. Personally, I mean, I think that's more of an American vision, because obviously traffic is so much worse there than it is here in Europe. It's one of those things. I mean, I've personally looked into aerial mobility, not just in urban areas, but in mountainous regions, in small islands, where actually the need is greater and it's a lot easier and safer to actually enact that. And we're looking at all sorts of applications, not just on, I guess, commercial applications, but really looking at where the public can benefit from something like this. So one of the myriad applications we've actually looked at outside of the sort of air taxi notion is being able to do air ambulances in a much better way. I'm not sure if you guys have seen one actually landing or taking off up close, but there is a huge, rotor on top of this thing, which means that it's limited in where it can land. The ones in London can get into some pretty tight spots. But imagine if you were able to use a multi-rotor with guarded propellers in the same way as you see some drones these days. It could actually literally bump into things and still be a safe vehicle to operate.
Yes, no, that's a fair point. I understand, and I think you're probably right in all these things, be it cargo delivery or, I say, UAM. I think the emergency services and critical services will be first, and should be first, I think. So unpack the Avo, and there's Luke. Luke's joining us from Spain as well, I think. Are you in Spain there, Luke, today? Where are you? If you can hear me. Can't hear me. Can you hear me, Luke? No. Anyway, right, let's go back to urban air mobility. So what will I'm not quite sure where the Aviary Project sits. So you're trying to pull together all the pieces, are you? Is that where you sit?
Yeah, so if I give you my own personal story, that might help to understand a little bit better. I have actually been working on UAVs for the last 5 or 6 years now, building in my kitchen. I'm not sure if you can see my 3D printer in the corner there on my kitchen table. And actually, I found that, I mean, this was kind of the turning point for me last year when the Go Fly project was launched. And what I found was that, especially in the UK, in London in particular, there was not enough in the way of community. There was no one to reach out to actually work with. And even most of my friends who I'd graduated were no longer in a technical field or were just simply not interested in joining. And from there, decided that I wanted to reach out and find other people that were interested in it and wanted to be involved. And from there, I met my other colleague, Damien, who's more interested on the infrastructure side, how we can using infrastructure to support urban aerial mobility in whatever form it takes. And Pamir as well, met at a pub. Actually, we were chatting to one of the employees at Lilium and kind of got introduced and kicked it off about 5 and a bit months ago. Really just trying to bring people together in a way that hasn't been done before, in an open, collaborative manner, so that basically we all benefit from each other's successes.
Oh dear, that won't work well in this industry. We're not open and collaborative. Well, that's crazy talk, Alice. That's crazy talk. Yeah, no, well, fair play to you. So, based in London, so are you hoping to have mainly UK people? I see that Uber have announced that they're going to have a bit of a go at drone deliveries in the Manchester area and create 1,000 jobs as well. I think they announced that today. So, who are you working with in the UK?
As such, we are basically partnering up with as many people in the industry, not just in the UK, across Europe. The main kind of, we're not positioning ourselves as necessarily a competitor to Uber. It's more of a counterweight. There's a lot of work going on in the US right now, and very little of this being brought together anywhere else in the world. And effectively, we want to just be a part of that to, as I say, make urban aerial mobility a reality. In the sense of what Uber is doing in the UK, I didn't hear about that, but I know that obviously talking about BVLOS regulations, unmanned can actually be harder than any sort of manned aviation, even if we're talking about crazy eVTOLs. I mean, if we think about it, there's a handful around the world which are allowed to operate, such as Volocopter in Germany has been given the, I think it's some sort of ultralight regulation. There's Kitty Hawk and Cora and Hoversurf in the US. But very, very few people in the world are being allowed to actually trial BVLOS cargo transport. And this is one of those interesting points where we're trying to figure out, as the Aviary Project, trying to figure out what is the best way to make this a commercial, a viable service in whatever way that it'll take, but identifying the market needs.
What happened in Dubai with the EM?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because someone, a little bird, not from the Aviary Project, also told me that the Dubai Civil Aviation Authorities banned EHang now from Dubai after a crash.
I mean, it's interesting. We noticed that EHang was one of the first people to partner up with Dubai and to sort of get the PR out there. But all of a sudden, they just sort of disappeared off the scene, and Volocopter seemed to take their place. One can only speculate, but my guess would be that Volocopter was demonstrating a lot more of the safety criteria that is so important in this field than EHang. I mean, EHang they've got the flight hours, they've got a lot of technical background behind them, but I think the bar is a lot lower in China than it is in a lot of the rest of the world. And I mean, you got to trust the Germans, right?
Well, EHang have used the AIrprox project very well for their machine. So when you said they got a lot of experience,
no, we don't know that, Gary.
Don't we?
They denied that. They denied that.
They denied that, even though it all came up on their screens at the back in their command center.
Yeah.
Well, even those Mavlink messages that were peculiar. Anyway, moving on very swiftly. And single IMU, I think we heard that was as well, didn't we?
A single IMU. Wow, that's not great.
I think we heard that. Didn't we hear that, Louis?
At least you got to go wrong.
Yeah, that's also true.
We don't endorse any kind of
man flight. Yeah.
Anything that endangers human lives. So that's a motto of ArduPilot. because we know that a flight stack to be able to carry people has a lot of regulations to be compliant to. So, and that is a very expensive project, and as an open source project, that is unfeasible.
I mean, so they're probably using INEV in.
INEV.
INEV.
Yeah, his face has not got INEV in it. Hello there, Stephen. Trust you. All right, come on, let me open to the floor. Floor, come on, take him apart. Tell him why urban air mobility is never going to work.
Sorry, urban air mobility, isn't that reinventing the wheel? Because we already have helicopters, and an helicopter is much more efficient in terms of energy than any multi-rotor that you can imagine. So unless someone changes basic laws of physics, going with the multi-rotor versus an helicopter is just wasting energy. So,
I mean, I'm really glad you brought up helicopters, because that's actually the way that we've been framing this, or at least I've been looking at this, is firstly, yes, we do have helicopters, they do work, but what's the core problem? I mean, the main problem is there's not enough of them in the sky, and the reasoning is that A, they're extremely expensive, mostly because of the maintenance factor.
Oh,
B,
come on! You can
loud.
buy a Robinson. You can buy a Robinson for the price of a top-end BMW. So
yes, but the cost of maintenance is more than half of the. I mean, actually, I have a friend who is an instructor and does a lot of work like looking after helicopters. And he told me, we basically calculated together, for every 100 hours of flight for a Robinson 22, 30 hours of maintenance. And these are expensive hours. There's a lot of parts that need replacing. There is a lot of man hours that goes into looking after these machines. And fundamentally, it's a difficult and expensive machine to run. Now, that's only one of the main problems from that as well.
If you operate drones, and I mean regular off-the-shelf drones on a commercial basis, you have also, if you want to be safe and have lower insurance rates, you have to be safe and have maintenances. For instance, I pay about 1/10 of the cost of a new drone every 50 hours of flight of Matrice 600. So,
sure. But these costs are much less for electric drive, because there's one moving part for an electric motor, as opposed to about 50 for a typical swash plate assembly. And I mean, again, that's only one of the main factors. The other one is, and this is something we're seeing across London in particular, the mayor's office has made a big point of saying that they want to reduce helicopter overflights purely for the noise factor. Helicopters are very loud. They are, they're an annoyance. And this is actually one of those things which is going to really get in the way of public acceptance. But the last thing is actually maybe, it's hard to say which is the most important, but safety. There is a huge element of safety. And one thing that I found out recently, one of the main reasons that Uber in particular chose to specify purely electric is because apparently the fire safety regulations for buildings are a lot more difficult to get around if you don't even have to be storing fuel on top of a building. Simply the fact that you've got a helicopter on top of a building which has fuel inside it. Okay. And the fire safety.
Can I be devil's advocate?
Sure. If you're about to say lipos, then yes.
So considering that current international aviation limit the power of batteries to 99 watt-hours. How are we going to solve the conundrum of having enough power to lift one single human that is 80 kilos?
So I'm not sure about. I've not heard about that regulation. I'm not that deep into the actual details of those regulations. But I mean, what I can say is that we have seen various vehicles which do function, which do work. And I mean, the volocopter is a great example. In my opinion, volocopter is going to be the first to have real UAM commercial operations. And if you look at what they're doing, they are functioning in a way that is potentially useful over useful distances and useful endurance times. So
can you define what is useful distance and useful payloads?
Sure.
That's the problem. If it's to walk around to the end of the street to my coffee shop, that's not useful. If it is to do a 30 kilometers drive to avoid me to do the highway, then it's something to be considered.
Sure. And I think it's not necessarily, this is again, I previously had my own UAV startup looking at cargo transport. And one thing that we sort of figured out is that it's not necessarily about distance. It's about the time that it takes on the ground to go from A to B. And if you look at areas with a high amount of geographical obstacles, so things like mountainous areas, even areas which may be quite flat but just don't have infrastructure in place, then the movement of goods, even from a couple of kilometers, can be quite difficult. Now, if you look at Volocopter specifically, they have decided to go over to Singapore very recently. I think they announced it about a week ago. Singapore obviously has a really unique geography. There's a couple of islands. There are some hills which are maybe a little bit difficult to get over. And to be honest, it may be a PR stunt, right? But if you can create a method of not having to create expensive new infrastructure projects, and you can still get from A to B in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, then all of a sudden, if those people are able to generate value on those journeys, then they're able to make it economical, which all of a sudden makes it a worthwhile enterprise.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still playing the devil's advocate.
Sure.
Because the energy problem is really hard, because we can see not without the resorting to aerial flights, we can see the problems that Tesla has with the battery packs, the cost of battery packs, the weight of the battery packs to do a reasonable range. And you can pick up, for instance, not going to a Tesla, going to a Smart, the electrical Smart, has a range of a terrestrial vehicle of 100 kilometers, and the size and weight of that battery makes it much heavier than the petrol or diesel variations. So, sorry, I cannot see, if we already have a reasonable system in place called helicopter, trying to reinvent the wheel, sorry.
I mean, let me just, I think, finish off on this, is that urban aerial mobility is a new business proposition. It's a new paradigm, not a new technology. And the thing is that if we were trying to define a very loose understanding of what we sort of think is urban aerial mobility, I would sort of say that it's effectively just being able to use aviation much, much more often over much shorter ranges than we currently do, being able to make use of that in an economical way. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, that if helicopters are so expensive and potentially unsafe and also noisy and annoying for people underneath, then whilst they are there and they can work in various different applications, high levels of aerial traffic inside a city is not going to be one of them. And that's where the technology element comes in. And I'm not saying I've got all the answers with regards to how people are going to overcome these challenges. But what I do know that if we can create that market need, then the technology will be developed to fit it.
Louis is such a naysayer. You're such a naysayer, Louis. Let me.
No, I'm not, because you know I fly helicopters and multi-rotors, and the noise factor on an electric helicopter or multi-rotor, it's not quiet because the air has to move around the blades,
and there are more of them.
There are more of them, but you can also put ducts around them, which massively mitigates the noise factor.
I know someone that made a video about ducks.
That one is for Bruce. Come on, Bruce. Your turn.
The problem I see, though, is these helicopters are expensive because they have all these moving parts. Well, you've got a lot of moving parts in a multi-rotor. That's why they're called multi-rotors. The big problem I see is, as Louis points out, it's the batteries. Now, at the moment, the power density by weight is simply not there to provide the kind of performance that will be necessary to make this commercially viable. Look at electric cars. You know, electric car might get charged once a day or 2 or 3 times a week, and we expect the batteries to last 10 years. Now, if you're going to use a urban mobility aerial device and it's going to be electrically powered, it's going to have to be charged many times a day because the range is short. And to get the return on investment, you need to be using it every working day. So the lifespan of a battery pack, bearing in mind that aviation authorities tend to be very conservative in how they rate these things, is probably going to be measured in months. And the cost of that battery pack is quite significant. So I don't think you're going to save money over helicopters. I really don't, because gasoline, petrol, benzene is very cheap, and you just pour it in. Sure, you're going to do 30 hours maintenance, but when you've got to change a battery pack every couple of months at a huge cost, that suddenly brings down a massive cost on top of the operation. Plus, you've got the fact that you still just don't have the performance. And there are other things like fallback systems. If you've got an unpiloted aerial taxi, and for some reason the GPS system goes down, where's your fallback?
So there's a couple of things in there. First things first, is that personally, I don't really believe in the autonomous taxi, aerial taxi situation, at least not for the next several decades. I mean, really, I believe that a pilot cannot be beaten at this point. So that's one thing. The second thing,
it's a stick. Beat them with a big stick.
So basically, you just reduce the usable payload of your vehicle by half.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, to a degree, that's fine. Well, I mean, if that's a 2-seater, then yes. But I mean, again, I think to begin with, it's if you're cutting down the cost of maintenance, the cost of operating and owning these vehicles, then all of a sudden it becomes an easier way to find applications. Maybe they're extremely short distance. As I mentioned, there is the opportunity to do short distance hops, which are otherwise very, very difficult to do. I mean, I'm sure you guys know about the shortest commercial flight in the world lasts less than 60 seconds in the Scottish Islands.
But for most purposes, you can't beat a trebuchet.
I mean, that is true. I'm not sure a person would survive a trebuchet, but you know, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But there was another point you mentioned regarding batteries, and this is actually something that I've personally been working on in some of my own designs. And one thing that almost nobody has seemed to consider is the idea of swappable batteries. So if you look at the ability to, there's 2 elements to this. Oh, mate, are you all right?
Yeah, you probably need to mute your microphone for the sneezes there, Luke. It's very good. It's like,
sorry.
That's all right, mate.
It's this European flu, man. Honestly, you go to INTERGEO, you meet all these Europeans and just give you every single disease known to man. In Africa, we only have one flu.
I'm sure they've regulated against the diseases, haven't they, by now? Brussels regulates against everything.
True.
God, how to change the topic.
I mean, the idea of using, yeah, that is a bit of a sidetrack. No, I was going to conclude by saying that swappable batteries allows 2 things. One, it allows really quick turnaround times, so you don't have to worry about supercharging or anything. If you can design your batteries to be easily removable on trays or trolleys in that way, and they can basically be slotted in and out. That's one element. But then talking about the actual lifetime of a battery, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the faster that you charge a battery, the fewer cycles that it has. So if you're not worrying about having to recharge it very, very quickly because you're actually swapping out the batteries, that means you can maintain the life cycle of a battery much, much longer than those couple of months you mentioned. You can actually keep them going for a lot longer and reduce the cost. And you know what?
Yeah, but then you've got the problem that suddenly your capital cost is soared by a factor of 10. And again, you've got to get a return on that. So helicopters are looking even more attractive. You said they were very expensive, but a aerial vehicle with 10 sets of batteries, so you don't have to charge them so fast, is probably going to cost significantly more than the equivalent fuel-powered helicopter. So where's your business case?
So this is where actually I think that there's going to be this uptake. If you think about, I mean, 100 years ago, there were so many people who sort of saw these original flying machines and thought, that's absolutely mental. There's no way in hell that's going to work. And even if it does work, what's the point? And I think personally, I mean, we are at the very start of this journey together, and we're trying to put a label on it. We're trying to say, you know, we expect this is going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, when really, I think that in the future, these business cases, these commercial applications are going to be something that we've not even thought of just yet.
Just before the podcast, we were discussing about alternative ways of generating electricity, namely hydrogen cells. Have you guys considered using hydrogen cells to generate electricity?
I mean, hydrogen cells or some other sort of hybrid, effectively, yes, they can increase range, but again, they increase the complexity, they increase the cost, and fundamentally, if you're doing that at the end, then will it end up being much more expensive than helicopters? Will it be comparable? Where is the line between saying, fine, yes, we have helicopters and yes, they work? And so I'm very aware of this sort of key line between where helicopters finish and eVTOLs start, and there's some sort of hybrids in the middle. But speaking of hybrids, I wanted to talk about a lot of the questions being discussed about range, and obviously there's all sorts of hybrid configurations. So whether you call it a lift plus cruise, quad plane, etc., or tilt rotors, tilt wings, all of those different options can also help improve performance. Now, again, I think it's one of those really interesting things where at the moment, all of these different vehicles look, some of them absolutely mad. And again, there's a huge parallel to about 100 years ago when people were trying to figure out what an airplane would look like. And now if you look up in the sky, to the untrained eye, most airliners look exactly the same. They figured out what worked and what was efficient, and they went with it. And I think that we're at the moment at the very, very beginning of that journey, trying to figure out what's going to work and how are we going to use these things.
I think you're right. I think if you look at it, we are at the very genesis of this whole thing, because at the moment we can't even fly a 1.5 kilo drone over a city without getting into trouble because it's too dangerous, far too dangerous according to the regulators. So we're not going to be flying people over the same area there with a huge potential for that. So you'd have to say it's probably at least 10 years away. So, and I went out before to try and find one of my amongst my trove of Popular Mechanics magazines. Every 3 or 4 years, Popular Mechanics would come out with a cover picture of the urban aerial transport vehicle. It was a flying car, or it was a device for, you know, a machine for getting people from A to B, from your garage to work, flying through the air. This has been a thing now for probably 60, 70 years. We've been promising this delivery of this technology. It's never come. And so I think it's probably, don't worry about energy sources at the moment, because I think it's a bit like nuclear fusion. It's 10 years away. So by the time we're ready for the vehicles, the power source will be there.
So actually, that's one of the things where I'm a bit of a skeptic. And I mean, everyone says much like, and I think fusion is the perfect example because people have been saying it's 10 years away for the last 30 or 40 years. And what I would say is that we shouldn't be relying on the battery industry to meet our expectations. We should be working as, well, I'm an aerospace engineer by training. We should be working as engineers to develop more efficient vehicles that are able to make use of the power sources that we have at the moment. I mean, I even know one of my former professors at Imperial College who's actually working on carbon fiber that can be used as a battery itself. And obviously it can only handle a minimal amount of charge at the moment. But if those things eventually mature, then all of a sudden it shouldn't be that hard to incorporate. I mean, if you're talking about swappable batteries, you can literally swap out your old batteries and put in the new ones. If you're talking about carbon fiber structural batteries, you design your next generation vehicles with those. But my personal opinion is, let's not wait for that. Let's see what we can do with it now.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull in some of the comments. Mick Malloy down in Australia. Good day to you, Mick. He says the Alpha Aero by Pipistrel has swappable batteries. That's already a manned electric aircraft and quite a cool one. Hello there to Adam from Dropcopter. And he makes a good point. What happens if defense locks out or reduces the accuracy of GPS? But I think that's going to be mitigated in the future by vision-based systems. If the thing, for argument's sake, is based in London, it'll probably have a pretty good vision system that lets it know exactly where it is in London.
Have you not seen the fog in London?
Yes, that's right. Yes, I've seen the.
I mean, there's alternatives as well. There's Galileo being launched as we speak by the EU. Who knows if the UK is going to be locked out of that? But you know, there are alternatives.
You already are, aren't you?
The UK is doing its own one.
let's not get into politics. It's not a good feeling.
And Richard's saying, I remember Clive Sinclair, and don't we all think that Bruce really's got a touch of the old Sinclairs about him there, coming out with a with a handheld TV in the 60s. Now 50 years later, we can watch TV on our phones. Yes, I remember that one as well.
I've still got my Sinclair calculator, my Cambridge Scientific.
That's right. Yes, I've got one, and a watch hiding somewhere. And no IMC conditions for auto taxi, VFR only. Well, if it was VFR only for these taxis or delivery services, then that would seriously reduce how effective they are. And you keep mentioning R22, and R22 will go about 200 nautical miles on 30 gallons of fuel.
Yep.
So it's hard to beat. Yeah, but we're being too hard. We're too hard on it.
No. I mean, absolutely. And these are the questions that are going to define the industry. And as I said, right, because urban aerial mobility is not a technology, not a series of technologies. It is a series of new business cases for aviation. And if we were able to say that we can use helicopters in an entirely new way that makes them more economical or allows us to use them much more often, then maybe that will be the first stage in urban aerial mobility. My colleague Pamir actually wrote a piece where he sort of coined the phrase aviation 4.0. And the way that he sort of describes that is over the years, aviation has become more and more common. I mean, currently, I can pay about £30 to EasyJet or Ryanair and travel internationally. And maybe at some point in the future, that £30 will allow me to travel. I mean, from my place in Northwest London to Central London costs more than that. If I was able to pay for some sort of aerial vehicle to take me for even the same amount of time, the same amount of money, but a much, much faster journey, then all of a sudden we start to see the commercial value. But again, I think it's just one of those things we're going to have to discover as we push the boundaries together.
So bring
back the Feely Rotodyne. Bring back the Feely Rotodyne.
Yes, that was in no way noisy. There was in no way noise issues with the Fairy Rotodyne. That was a terrible thing, wasn't it? But you're saying, so are you the only group then that's considering urban air mobility as reshaping the current picture, really? I think everyone else is just rushing straight to electric whizzy gig things that don't really exist. So that's quite smart if that's what you're thinking. But how are you going to push the doors down of civil aviation authorities around the world? Because that's who you're going to have to convince.
I think firstly, I don't think we're the only people who are looking at this in terms of commercial applications. There is a huge amount of hype, and we're seeing that with all these amazing projects around the world. They are exciting, but fundamentally, if commercially they're not going to work, then they're just another pile of Concords at the end of the day. Great and really interesting, but they're not going to make anyone any money, and that's fundamentally what drives industry. The second thing is we don't want to push down the doors of the CAAs around the world. We want to work with them. I mean, again, if you have these new generations of vehicles, or if you have people literally begging and pleading for new applications for using existing aircraft in completely different ways, then all of a sudden, I mean, the CAA actually has somewhere in their charter or somewhere in the paperwork, their endless paperwork online, they say that they are aware and trying to be helpful of industry, supposedly. But working with them around the world, I mean, I'm sure that 100 years ago, people were looking at these mad things and thinking, is someone going to crash into my house? Is someone going to spy on me from above? And now it's the most common thing in the world to look up and see airplanes or helicopters above you. But I think they just need to be brought to the table, learn what it is that we are trying to achieve. We need to learn what it is they want to see, and then we meet somewhere in the middle and we go from there.
well, there's a silence from your audience here, because we've all tried to get aviation authorities to meet us somewhere in the middle, and that's almost the Silicon Valley thinking. That, you know, technology will push regulations out of the way, and it doesn't work. I'm quickly going to go to the comments again. Mick says in Sydney it costs more to park your car at the airport for the weekend and then return the return flight to Melbourne. I've got to wonder why anyone would actually go to Sydney. And then Pudu Jabba, I've got to say your name, says that we'll find our way with safety science. CA will get on board when there is safety case and data. Well, that's already missing. That piece is already missing from the unmanned world, and we can talk about
when have regulators ever relied on data? I mean, look at the data that flies in conflict with the regulations they're doing. They don't care about the data. They'll shape it to suit their agenda.
Come on.
How very dare you? How very dare you?
We only need the spreadsheet on Excel to give us the answers we want. No matter what you put.
Not one person has ever died as a result of a recreational multi-rotor drone use. Yet well,
now you've jinxed it, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's the data. The data says it's the safest aspect of aviation, yet it's now becoming the most regulated aspect of aviation. They don't give a damn about the data.
And that's actually true. I mean, one of the things I hear the most is people talking about these things spying in our windows. And yeah, I mean, I haven't heard not one case of that in the UK, let alone anywhere else. And it's a public acceptance thing. And this is actually one of the main missions of the Aviary Project, is to work on public acceptance of these technologies, and in a way that people can very, very clearly see the benefits. So as I mentioned earlier, emergency services, if we can demonstrate that maybe this is the first application for eVTOL aircraft, then all of a sudden people see these things flying around saving lives. Maybe that is the best way to then bring aviation authorities to the table, is when people are saying
the best way is to put guns on it and get the military interested. That will just, it'll grow, plenty of funding, it'll become accepted worldwide. That's like it happened with drones, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. But I mean, ideally not having these things kill each other is not an ideal way forwards, let's say.
Nick, stay with us. Look, we've already gone to 36 minutes. I said by accident we've gone to 36 minutes. Stay with us. Keep arguing with us. Sorry we were so rude for your first visit, but that's just. And it's and the rest of us are normally quite nice. It's Bruce. It's Bruce is the master. So he forces us to do that. But Luke is see Luke quite frequently down here in South Africa. He lives just down the road in the city. You'll hate me for saying that. He doesn't live in the city near Durban.
Don't stay in the city.
You stay in the city. It's much closer to the city than me.
Negative.
That's not untrue. But you've also.
I live on a gravel road. I think I live more on a farm than you.
I live on a dirt road. Anyway, let's not talk about the roads for too much longer. You've been at the source. I wanted to sort of bring you in a bit quicker, because you've been at the heart of a lot of hype as well. You've been at speaking at INTERGEO. Is that right? I think that's what it's called, isn't it?
Yeah, INTERGEO.
INTERGEO in Germany. And so you've seen a lot of the. And Pudu, we're going to talk about Plexidrone just now. We'll get there. Just be patient. But you've been at the heart of a lot of the nonsense. What was the peak nonsense that you saw at INTERGEO? Or should we start with the good stuff? Let's go for the peak nonsense first.
Well, yeah, let's start with the good stuff first. I was lucky enough to go to INTERGEO. Interesting to see how majority of the survey industry is cracks along, and what they're actually doing, and meeting people from all over the world, and see we all do the same thing basically. Although it's hard to imagine some of those people in their smart suits sweating it out in the bush and, banging away looking for monuments and things like that. But it was interesting to see how big the scale of how big the industry actually is in terms of selling their equipment. INTERGEO is really large. There's 850 vendors or booths at this event. And when I first arrived there, I was rather disappointed. I entered on the top floor. And about half the stalls on the top floor seem to be Chinese manufacturers of ranging rods and tripods and prisms and various odds and sods that you can basically buy at a hardware shop. And yeah, I was a little bit disappointed. I thought, well, maybe the big guys downstairs will start having, the GPSs and things like that, where you can only drool over, and the banks get rather excited about lending us large amounts of money for. And yeah, when you go downstairs, drones was just the whole floor downstairs was just covered with various manufacturers from all over Europe, most of them from Eastern Europe, a couple from Germany, obviously being a German event. There's quite a lot of smaller guys, but a lot of them seem to be manufacturers or small-scale manufacturers that have had some sort of funding from universities and things like that. Put it this way, is the most common aircraft that you saw there at the event was not a multi-rotor, surprisingly, but a VTOL. VTOLs was the flavor of the month. They came from a variety of claims of guys claiming proudly to do 30 minutes, to guys claiming to do 7 hours. I think I saw one that said they could do amazing things like that. The other big showstoppers there, I suppose, and the most amount of foot traffic was the DJI released that RTK Phantom 4. So there was a lot of excitement at that. To me, a Phantom's a Phantom's a Phantom. It's just had an extra new gray blob on the top of it, and that was about it. But the other exciting thing, I suppose, for some was the EV. They had that new camera of theirs that does oblique imagery, so it can look forwards and backwards as well as down. I don't know how it does that, but they're trying to, I suppose, crack the market and to do more oblique imagery as well for like urban centers and things like that to map the sides of facades of buildings, etc. So yeah, you can buy one of those if you want.
But how many of those shiny VTOLs would we use here in Africa? How many of them were practical?
Well, the problem is they're quite expensive. Hey? Those things are empty. They're in the most basic configuration. This just excludes radios and things like that. Those things start at about 65,000 euros, which in my opinion is a lot of money. I mean, Gary's did quite well. It's a piece of foam, it can do probably better than a lot of or can perform a lot better than what some of those fancy models can do. But
that isn't, I think that's a bit of a disc. That is the one, and Nicola, of course, is the great proponent of the foam monsters. But I think there's a disconnect at the moment with what's coming out of universities and things, because they're not seeing that. Yes, you can buy off-the-shelf stuff from China that I think this coming year is going to meet 6 hours, and it's bish bosh dish dosh. Those motors, those speed controllers. It's got the room-fitted camera, and that's that. I think the whole smoothie. There's some lovely looking things out there. Lovely.
There's no doubt.
Beautiful things. They're beautiful things, but are we going to chuck them in the back of a truck for day in, day out work? Because at the end of the day, the drone is just a hammer or a saw in the back of the truck to do a job. Yeah. Doesn't have to look pretty.
No, I tell you now, I looked at most of those ones because I am in the market for. Maybe I shouldn't publicly announce this though, because now I'm going to get a flood of emails of salespeople from China.
No, it's okay. Nobody watches it. You're fine. You're absolutely fine.
But I was looking at some stuff at the mindset of maybe if I had to get a VTOL or something like that, which one would I go for? Which one would be the most robust? And to be honest, I didn't see a single one there that would actually really last, or would have to have some severe modification from my part to be able to suit my needs. Yeah, sure, the supplier says that they will be able to customize and so on. But you need to Africa-proof things. I mean, I'm not saying Africa is the hardest place in the world. There's probably far worse places. But when it comes to hanger rash, which is probably the most common damage that you get to aircraft, the stuff is too fiddly still. It's too home built and so on to justify that price. Then let's get on to the negatives. I reckon that I really struggled to find, for one, a fuel aircraft, maybe multi-rotor, whatever. There was one that I saw there. That was liquid fuel, petrol, or whatever. There was one there that I saw. Everything else is just batteries, off-the-shelf LiPos, which is kind of strange. Everyone takes the wrapping off and then puts their own heat shrink on with their label on it. But it's a LiPo at the end of the day. The other So I'm going to have to make this quick because I see my battery's actually dying now.
Oh, good.
I'm on top of a terrace here in the middle of nowhere. The part that my biggest gripe was that I didn't see any DJI flight controllers. I mean, for definitely not for the VTOLs and so on, for the planes. But for the multi-rotors as well that I saw, I really struggled to see any sort of DJI product there, which is probably a good thing in my jaundiced view. But running Pixel 2s was the flavor of the day. There was a few Navios and a few other open source ones. Well, not open source, but a few other autopilots I didn't see. So it's safe to say that
the AIrprox. Sorry, I think you're probably going to say it. Yeah,
are running autopilot. And out of everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people would acknowledge that yes, they are running autopilot or autoplane and so on. But then they would say, "Oh no, but it's our little flavor, that we're adding onto it. It's our custom landing, so it, the aircraft orientates itself into the wind when it comes in for landing, or it's our mission planning software even, which is clearly just a bog standard mission planner, which I feel is really struck because you're charging so much money for this aircraft. Surely you should proudly say on the side of it, look, powered by autopilot or something. I'll give credit where credit is due. Sure, yeah, the hardware is there, it's a Pixel or whatever the case is, but the code that's actually running it is what you're actually buying the aircraft for. I mean, why not actually say what it is?
Yeah, that's a problem that AIrprox has. Lots of people use it, and some acknowledge that they use it. Most say they don't use it. Okay.
It's a fact of life.
It's a fact of life. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes what is painful being on the side of autopilot is that sometimes some of those guys have good ideas, good implementations, which they don't share back, and at least that's it is what the minimum that would be required. But our license works as it is, so good luck to them. Make lots of money and be back when you need it.
It would be interesting to see next year in Stuttgart how many of those guys are still going to be at INTERGEO, how many of those companies still exist and how many aircraft they've actually managed to sell. But I did see a few demonstrations as well in such a challenging environment. We're in the middle of Frankfurt. It's with these buildings all around and so on. It's quite a challenging environment. There was a few demonstrations of a couple of VTOLs like the Wingtra, the Rycopter, the Regal's scanning copter and so on, which was fun. But it was interesting to see them actually working in an environment like that. Oh yeah, the EP as well did a demonstration too. It was nice to see the stuff working in a hard place like that. But for me personally, I don't think I have much experience or would actually ever have a need to work in an urban place like that. But it's nice to see. Oh yeah, and that was the other comment too, before my battery completely dies, that some of the people there, the seasoned people, this is my first time ever to INTERGEO, but some of the seasoned people that have been there since its inception, since its beginning, have said that they've noticed in the last few years there's been an enormous increase in traffic and a number of vendors. And they attribute this almost solely to this drone revolution, people using these now for their tools. This, I think, is quite interesting about the impact that it's actually had in the survey industry. And although in South Africa, I can't really speak for all the vendors, but the number of theodolites and GPS sales, I wonder how many drone sales they actually make as well, ones that are dedicated for survey purposes. I doubt that many of those that they're at INTERGEO would be on for sale in South Africa, or many are being bought in South Africa.
Yeah, because you've got to remember it wasn't a drone conference. It was a surveyors conference.
Yeah,
which is turning drone. Yeah.
Rather rapidly.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it, that people are making platforms that are just not really fit for purpose. That's just the bottom line, isn't it? There's a lot of them out there, and a lot of people are going to be disappointed by it. But I can't help but think that the marketplace is going to consolidate into a few DJI type aircraft and a few fixed wing aircraft very soon, and surveyors will know exactly what a surveyor knows what they need it to do, and that will be made to do whatever that is, and that's done. It's job done. We get to 6 hours, all the usable light in a day, and jobs are good. And what else do we need? And then all that will happen is the cameras will get better, or this will get, slight iterations.
But that's only half the task. You bought your fancy tool, and you've now complying with regulations. But that's only half the actual job. The client's not paying you to do that, to buy a fancy toy for him. You've actually got to do the survey and actually process out some data, which was interesting too. And that I didn't see too many there's the same old vendors really that are doing photogrammetry, these affordable photogrammetry software for this type of work that these kind of aircraft are going to generate. Yeah, sure, your laser scanner that comes normally bundled with some very special processing stuff, but I mean, you're spending a lot of money on that scanner, already. That puts you in a different kind of bracket. But there seems to be almost like a stumbling block here now when it comes to processing of the data, generating orthomosaics and so on. And then the next step of actually making proper surveys out of it, be it, topographic.
It's okay. I've got a drone deploy account. I can be a surveyor. It's easy. What's hard? Nothing hard about it. Come on. It's easy. I don't know what the fuss is about.
Yeah, surprisingly, drone deploy wasn't present at INTERGEO, surprisingly.
Really? There's a bit of a shocker.
But I'm sure
or maps may be easy.
Maps may be easy, Pix4D and Agisoft. So they are the guys that are everywhere on that. So you speak to any guy that does orthophotogrammetry, and that's what they use. I believe I spoke with a couple of guys here that do orthophotogrammetry, and they're very excited with the Phantom because it's a very small tool for a considerable low price and gets the job done. And that's the biggest, because if you require, for instance, a plane to do a survey, the logistics of operating with even a VTOL, the logistics of operating with such a craft is completely bonkers. So if you can get a Phantom or Phantom style vehicle, it's much easier. And as you well mentioned, going to in Africa or in somewhere else in the world and putting the tools on the back of a pickup, it's going to get banged.
And you need to be able to repair it as well in the field too. You can't go and send it off now to Switzerland to go and get calibrated and this push rod to get put in place by a calibrated, science engineer and all the rest of it. You need to be able to put duct tape on it and complete your job because your site establishments are so high, or it takes you 2 weeks to get to site. So that was the other reason too, is that this stuff is not repairable. Most of EPO planes and so on, you can super glue them and duct tape them, put some splints on place. You can get the job done. It will limp, but it will do it. But these carbon fiber, hollow, monoframe, I don't know, special type of aircraft, it's going to break. It's just going to put a big hole. Big duct tape will fit it.
Usually they'll break while transporting to the survey sites.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yep.
So it's not a wise purchase, I'm afraid.
Yeah. It's got a but this how many years out then is the survey industry from working that out, do you think? You're ahead in working it out, but surely the industry will catch up and realize it doesn't need to be too shiny. It's just got to get the job done.
I don't know, your friends, what they call Braymore. Are they Braymore?
Yeah.
Your buddies there. I mean, they're still in business. But clearly it's okay-ish, I suppose. But I don't know. I think that unless you have a DIY mentality and you're happy to build your own aircraft and your regulations allow for you to supply a handwritten manual and so on for an aircraft like that, then that's probably the answer. Yeah, but if you have to comply with regulations and you have to do the same thing that everyone else does, get an EB. Why just be a sheep? It's much easier.
Yeah, true enough. Now, before you, well, if you disappear because your battery's gone, you better keep chipping if you want. We better move on because we've nearly been here an hour. And I know in the comments, and I've got to say his name again, old Poodoo, was talking about, and I'm going to jump to it. We mentioned last week in passing, and Ian mentioned it as well, Plexidrone. Do you remember that fabulous Kickstarter? Or Indiegogo, wasn't it? Well, the Federal Trade Commission are now investigating them, and hopefully people are going to start getting their money back. Does anyone want to jump in on that? Or come on, someone help.
No, come on. Let's go to the airware auction of assets.
Oh, the airware auction. Now that's interesting on many levels, isn't it? The particular many level that I'm interested in is they really didn't have a great deal of aircraft and interesting aircraft either.
Yeah, Inspire 1s, Inspire 2s, Phantoms, and not much else.
The only interesting wasn't it? Yeah.
The only interesting thing were the Dell rugged laptops. That's the only interesting.
Yes, it's the interesting thing that people that we know are saying. Very, very good, Luke. Very, very good. Yeah, there is a mute button is available. You sneezing, you just take over the whole stream. It's really good.
He's dying on air live.
And we die every week, don't we? But there is a mute button at the top of the page there. But
this is the first time I've ever used this thing.
Oh, there you are. You see, you got the top. You can switch your microphone
on. I can turn you off as well. That's great.
You can. That's what most people have, so that's absolutely fine.
I wish it was in real life. I could turn you off as well.
Oh, yeah, whatever. Yeah, next week we'll be tuning another Believer. Someone in the comments is saying, how did the Believer and Tough Wing work out in the field? Well, you quickly mentioned the Tough Wing. I think the Believers, I think, is wonderful. Assuming them very biased, I don't work for them. But you talk about the Tough Wing, Luke.
Yeah. It's actually, it was recommended to me by some person that I should buy a Tough Wing for smaller sites, and it's actually one of my favorite aircraft. Really, I quite enjoy it. I've never had a Delta Wing or a Wing before, but for very small sites, hectare sites, it's a winner. Needs a little bit of modification and fiddling around to make more aerodynamic and so on. But it's really, suits its name. It's pretty tough. I've flown into pretty heavy stuff. The problem is I'm not very competent at flying these things manually. So I always use the parachute to land, which is quite nice because I'm now well accustomed to its characteristics for when it lands. And it's traveled all over Africa with me, and it still works pretty well.
It's a bit of a faff, isn't it, packing that parachute?
No, once you get the hang of it, it's actually not that bad. It only took me about 30 times, and then I finally got it right. I made a little bit of a stencil out of cardboard, and it folded around that, and then it goes really simply. Otherwise, your 3 inches becomes 5 inches.
You say that to all the girls. What else we'll say is we did fly that thing up at altitude on a trial. I think were we about 7,000 feet on that particular day that we flew it, and it went really well considering it's kind of a sea level craft, and that was actually the time we managed to ice up a Believer as well. So it was a pretty out there day.
That was with terrible batteries. Those with like 5C batteries as well. They were like about 3 years old. Since then, I've actually managed to destroy a good couple of batteries in that Tough Wing. It is quite power hungry. It's quite consistently power hungry, I find out. But I think that the CG may be off, which my mechanic is busy sorting that out now. But I have put some 45C batteries in it now, and it gives a much easier takeoff. Once you get the hang of it now, it's really a piece of cake.
Well, that for people that don't know, the parachute sticks out in a little sort of pod halfway down the airframe, and it can't be good. It can't be good at all for these things. Mick Malloy says, get a cheap wing from Hobby King and get some stick time in. I've been trying to get him to do that for years. He's got you've got hey, there we are. Yeah, there's one in the back here.
Yeah.
But no, it just
unfortunately, Gary's flying lessons at Gary's Flying School are exorbitantly expensive, and I'm still trying to save to be able to afford the tuition.
Absolutely, yes. Well, never knowingly undersold, and all those other good things that people say. What are we saying? Believe it was VTOL. It's not a VTOL. Yes, it is a VTOL. And it's a very nice aeroplane. So anyway, let's jump back to. Did anyone have any comments about the thingy, the Plexidrone? No. All right then, we'll move on. No, people aren't getting their money. What else are we going to talk about? Oh yeah,
the DJI thing. That DJI demanded that Dayton University to remove that misleading video. Come on, it was nice to see someone with a weight in the market to come up front and tell what we've been saying for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, right, Bruce?
Absolutely, Louis.
So, basically, they got the Bruce virus. They're doing a Bruce on that Dayton University.
Yeah, the Trailer Park University, as it's called.
Well, yes, you're the one that's saying. I see the Sinclair colleges back that as well. What are they saying? They're making noises that it was representative of a Mooney. It wasn't supposed to be a Mooney. It was just a bit of wing they had lying around. They are sort of changing the story a little bit there. I don't think they were expecting heat from DJI, and it is just, as we have said, as you rightly we've said for the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's just we've sort of watched that one grow, haven't we? We all saw that happen. It probably was 3 weeks ago, and the story's got bigger and bigger and bigger as time's gone by.
All the regular newspapers that usually don't carry drone news here in Portugal have been carrying that video on their online editions. This is why drones are dangerous. So they got their 5 minutes of fame, that university, and like Bruce said, it is in the middle of where, Bruce? That university is in the middle of
a trailer park.
Trailer park.
Yes.
but it's right, isn't it? I mean, as DJI pointed out, that there's 4 times the energy involved there than would actually happen if a Mooney was approaching an airfield and hit a phantom drone. Scientifically, it's just a ridiculous test. But notice how very boldly emblazoned on the wing was the Dayton University logo and name. It's a marketing video, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's worked very well. It's sort of hit that sort of viral status, hasn't it? It's also interesting, and it sort of speaks to it that this week very much has been the week of AIrprox's reports from. Well, you just pick a country, and an airliner has narrowly missed something somewhere.
Yes, it's like those headlines that say 60 million people in the UK didn't win the lottery this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, tell us when something happens. Don't tell us when something doesn't happen. I mean, it's just keeping up the whole inertia of all drones are dangerous. Drones will kill you. Drones will kill hundreds. It's just that whole misinformation coming from the media. And I've been working, every time I see a story, I put comments on there saying, please list all the deaths attributed to the recreational use of multi-rotor drones in the last 50 years. And that's when they shut up. No one comes back with an answer to that one.
And this speaks to very much to Nick's image issue that they're going to have with urban air mobility, and as they change things. And yes, we always get on. We probably repeatedly come back to search and rescue, and search and rescue is becoming a thing now that is useful and happening around the world. Lives are being saved, and rescue's time is being reduced by ARPAs. That is becoming an absolute fact.
I just want to jump in there, actually.
Go on.
Sorry, go on.
No, after you.
Oh, I was just going to say actually. So I studied at Imperial College, one of the top technical universities in the world. And what I learned while I was there is that search and rescue robots is basically when you can't think of anything useful for it to do aside from that. That's the kind of the way that they justify creating something that's really cool and really interesting, but at the end of the day has no real function in the world.
It probably does if you're lost. If you're lost somewhere, you'd find it very useful. But the other thing was, did you see ISIS are going to crash a drone into the Eiffel Tower?
I mean, I don't know if that's going to do anything, but it's a big steel tower versus probably a Matrice.
Nah, it would be a urban mobility vehicle, I'm sure of it.
Well, you're not sure it's going to do any real damage.
Yeah, the drone will get destroyed.
It will. Yes. Yeah. I can't think that it would it? I mean, that's a funny. Well, let's not go down this route. Another way to demonetize your video, as ever. It's a very popular way, isn't it? But then, okay, you went to Imperial College, so you're the grown-up in the room. Now you are now assigned the duty grown-up role, Nick. What did you think of that research? You must have had a look at it with an analytical head. Which
research specifically, or just robotics in general?
No, the university that threw a phantom at a Mooney wing.
I did see that. Yes, yeah. So I think one of the core things is that if you're looking at what that can do to a light aircraft, then that's definitely worrying. And more so because, I mean, I actually live a few kilometers away from an airstrip in Northwest London, and I fly in my local park. I make sure that I'm outside of the area of the air traffic control, but frankly, there are a lot of people that I know personally who have no such awareness or no such inclination to make sure they're being safe. Now, if you look at what happens when a drone hits the wing and it's on approach and it's not got that much speed to recover, it's not got any altitude to do anything with, then it could be catastrophic. However, I think and I've been saying this for years, is that the only way we're going to solve these problems is when manufacturers, DJI in particular, takes responsibility and does something about it. I mean, they have now put no-fly zones around prisons. They've got warning zones around certain airstrips. But I mean, one of the most worrying things is that actually there's no restrictions to fly around really high security areas like number 10 Downing Street. You can look it up on their map right now, and I hope they're listening out there maybe, that there are no-fly restrictions for one of the most common drones in the world to fly over our government buildings.
You cannot fly on Tiananmen Square.
Sorry?
Yes.
You cannot fly on Tiananmen Square, so...
Sure, and that's probably because the Chinese said, if you don't block this now, then we're going to block you. Same way with the White House. I believe the White House has got a no-fly zone around it as well. But maybe it's incumbent upon specific national governments to make these requests. Maybe it should be, in my opinion, it should be incumbent on DJI to be sensible. I mean, personally, I think they're being very irresponsible in a whole host of different ways. But one of the core things is that if they are advertising that it can reach several kilometers in range with a clear picture, then what are you telling people? You're telling people that you should be making the most of this product. And fundamentally, most governments around the world have imposed that 500-meter limit. And this is the problem that we're facing. And it kind of brings me on to UTM solutions, unmanned traffic management. And again, a lot of people have a lot of ideas and they have a lot of ways of potentially solving these problems. But fundamentally, it's not going to happen in any significant way until manufacturers, particularly DJI, get on board.
Yes, and yeah, you're bob on right. Let's take a look at the super biased me, the altitude angel map in the UK will give you a fantastic amount of information. And then if you compare and contrast that with what's on the DJI app, well, it's like almost a blank sheet of paper, and
Yeah,
people will use.
DJI want to sell product, and what good would people buy a DJI product if they took it out of the box and they couldn't use it anywhere because this is too close to the airport, and this is, you know, I mean, they're looking from the bottom line perspective. Safety is one of their top 50 priorities, but bottom line is the first one.
Yeah, no, that is the bottom line, isn't it? If correct airspace and other, you know, stuff was considered, there'd be very few places that you could fly in cities around the world.
They'd probably argue like it's like a gun. It's not the tool, it's the person. You know, you can't ban guns because a few people use them badly, and you can't build guns that don't shoot because they're completely useless. So if DJI built a drone that didn't fly, they wouldn't sell any, and that's why, you know, there has to be this personal responsibility thing. But I do think this whole advertising thing, basically, DJI are advertising an illegal product. And they're selling an illegal product. You know, I guess, although when you think about it, it's the same as a car. You can go and buy a car that'll do 2 or 3 times the posted speed limit.
Same as cars. Why advertising the Bugatti Chiron that goes 400 kilometers per hour?
But you're actually not allowed to. Cars is a really good example because you're not allowed to, at least in the UK. Advertising Standard Agency basically says you're not allowed to show this car going anywhere near above the speed limit because they're actively trying to discourage that behavior. And this is something I've discussed separately with a lot of colleagues and friends, is that when it comes down to misuse of UAVs, there's one key thing that's missing, and it's similar to, in my opinion, drunk driving campaigns around the world. You can tell people don't do it, and you can tell people don't do it or else we'll come after you, but until you show them visually what can happen when it goes wrong, then they're not going to believe you. I mean, I'm sure most people here, if not everyone, has used, for example, a DJI Phantom. And if you take your hands off the stick, it stays pretty much where it is. And the only thing is, that's great until it stops working. And then all sorts of bad things happen. And it gives people a false sense of security. And when they have that false sense of security, they're inclined to do stupider and stupider things until it crashes and may end up hurting someone.
I don't need a false sense of security to do stupid things. I can do it without
that. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's, well, and Pudu, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying there. Unfortunately, it is preaching to the converted here, even though we've had a rag at you with urban air mobility. I think we all, just about every week we come around, we end up saying, and we need enforcement. And that is what's kind of needed. People need to stand up and face some enforcement. And yeah, I mean, DJI are selling, you know, 20, 30,000 craft a month now. But how many of them are actually flying, and how many, you know, for the number of RPAS flights going on every day around the world, we still haven't had, it's an awful thing to say, isn't it? But we still haven't had that fatality, and it's several hundred years away if some studies are to be believed.
That's right. As I said in my video, I mean, you know, we have, if you compare drones to manned aviation is hugely more dangerous, hugely more incidents reported even. The drone community, despite what the media shows, is one of the safest aspects of aviation. And regardless of the fact that there's a few bad actors out there who do bad things, when you take all the numbers and you crunch them all up, the responsibility and the actions of the unmanned community are far more responsible than that of the manned aviation community. So why aren't they addressing the real problems, the elephant in the room, which is the manned aviation community? They are the ones that need to be sorted out, because they're the ones that are killing people.
Again, it's down to public perception, in my opinion. It is this element of the unknown that people get. I mean, you know, we were just talking about this earlier about the military applications. Until about 10 years ago, drone meant something that was flying overhead in Afghanistan and Iraq and was firing weapons at people. Up until very recently, that's all it meant. And now it is, in the eyes of consumers, it is a flying camera. And if you can have a camera that flies around, then you can have a camera that spies through your window. And all of a sudden, you have something that the public has to fear. Now, again, I was at an event 2-3 months ago now in London with Nesta, as an organization that was doing a study across 5 cities in the UK, and they were talking about, at its very core, how do we enable drone usage by looking at purely the public acceptance and public benefit to get that public acceptance. And we're still not there yet because there's not enough focus on how can these help people. When we start looking at how can these actually help public life, then we're going to start to see a massive change in public attitudes.
So where do you see the Aviary project coming to life, other than the 21st of November when you officially launch? But when do you see? Have you got a 5-year vision, a 10-year vision, or a 50-year vision? Where are you looking?
All of the above. And we're starting off with a roughly 5-year calling it roughly, we haven't quite decided how to frame it, but call it 2025 for the moment. And we're basically trying to talk about where can we actually get to in that time frame? What is reasonable? What do we think is doable? And one of the main things is to engage with public groups, to engage with policymakers in particular, and to be able to drive the agenda, as it were. The way that we sort of see ourselves is what's the word I'm looking for? Someone in the middle of everything. Glockenspiel. That is a good word. It's not the word I was looking for.
But
an integrator.
I think now, from here on in, we shall all think of the Aviary Project as the glockenspiel. I think now that is firmly fixed. That is
you're still on time to change the marketing materials for the 21st.
We are actually getting the banners done up right now. It's going to be hashtag glockenspiel in the corner.
Yeah, it'd be very, very disappointing if the word glockenspiel does not appear in the marketing somewhere now. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. So we are cynics, and that's more from the hype technology thing that's out there. But you very nicely addressed that fact. So we shall watch you with interest. Well, I know another thing I wanted to add for our American viewers, our Part 107 viewers. Did you pick up that Honeywell have gotten into some surveys, 150 miles of power lines? Now, you're kind of in trouble if Honeywell are going to be doing the job, aren't you? If the big boys are coming to play those big infrastructure inspections, then what's left for everybody else? No one got an opinion on that?
State photography.
Yeah, there you go.
Do they want to do it as on a continuous base, or they're just proving themselves that their technology, they're using the FOMI as a technology demonstrator of their technology?
No, it's the Honeywell UAV program, and
with cameras being so cheap, why don't they just put cameras on the power lines to look at themselves, and then
come on. Then we have blockchain. We have blockchain. What is the other thing?
Oh God, please don't talk to me about blockchain. Blockchain is easily, above UAM. Blockchain is the worst hype cycle in the world.
Blockchain, Bruce chain, and then
but it's okay, because I'm going to use my artificial intelligence to sort it all out.
I know. And then now we are missing one.
Rendering, 3D rendering.
No. IoT.
Oh yes,
IoT. That will change the world.
I have, and this will it won't make Luke laugh. I never make Luke laugh, but I've been helping at a school, and 3 businesses have come in the last 2 weeks and told us at a school in the Natal Midlands in Nottingham Road that IoT is going to make a huge difference, and tried to dazzle me with IoT science. I can't believe it. I cannot believe.
That's the solution for Bruce. Just get a cheap camera, an IoT device on every pole.
And 5G and a glockenspiel. We must have a glockenspiel at all sites. Voodoo says 5G, and that's exactly what these people are claiming they're going to bring to our little village in the Midlands is 5G. before Luke gets it because he lives in the cities, but he'll get it first. But yeah, no, it's amazing the hype that's out there, isn't it? What else? I'm looking across this. Oh, I meant to start the top of this show. There's some sad news this week, and that was that Dave Mathewson of the AMA passed away. So condolences to his friends and family. We've sparred with him in the past at SGS News on more than one occasion, and it was always a good fight and a fair fight. So sorry to hear that. So on that note, as we go 19 minutes past the hour, I've got to do my normal. Has anyone else seen anything else that's caught their eye this week?
I saw it on your site, Gary. The announcement of launching of yet another LANC solution. So we were missing LANC solutions. Now we have LANC solutions. Or
yes, and
or whatever they're called.
It's Lance, yes. They keep switching it off as well. It's not going as swimmingly as they thought it would. And yeah, and what are we saying? LoRaWAN. There we are. Richard's saying LoRaWAN. Now, all right. So Lance, yeah, I think there's about 30 providers now. And so the other two, the original two, that had a huge commercial advantage by being let out of the gate like 6 months before everybody else. I still don't think they've spun a dime out of that. I've been told 5G is going to happen because I've got to meet a man with Gillette. Anyway, so I'll move away from that. Did anyone else see anything else that they thought was interesting? And actually, we haven't asked what on earth is Nicola make. Nicola, what are you making today?
More of the same as last times. I'm just working on an Omnibus F4 Pro with an audio plane that's supposed to go into this, which is the main body of the Sonic Model R600, like some very tiny wing. This is like 1/2 of a wing.
It's a
very tiny model. Yeah. But I am planning to have full autopilot, like audio plane in this, the antenna tracker, RunCam split, the Split Mini 2 actually, which I prepared today to go into it. And right now I'm just putting early tomorrow we'll finish it. We'll have to take care of that thing here, because there's just too much cable for my liking. And hopefully this is going to be a light build, and hopefully next week I'm going to take it with me to a very, very beautiful place. And if all goes well, I should have some pretty nice footage from it, from high up into the mountains.
And have you flown the crosswind yet? And have you got the milliamp hours consumption that we were hoping for?
Well, no. You know I haven't flown.
No, I was just in TV land and radio land, they set these things up, and then you're supposed to react in a sort of way to suggest that we haven't.
No, because if I'd flown it again, you'd know. It'd be on my YouTube channel.
Oh, we know your YouTube channel's months behind what you've actually done normally.
No. Come on. If it was months behind, it'd be old news by now. But seriously, I think CG props possibly slightly slower motors, and I'm pretty sure it can get under 100 milliamps per kilometer on 6S, which at least in my book would make it the most efficient plane I'm using. Whether it can be, I still have to get the believer back up into the air after that autopilot thing. Haven't touched it yet, but there's so much to do.
Well, under 100 milliamp. Yeah, but under 100 milliamp per kilometer would be really quite the thing, wouldn't it? That would be amazing, especially with a useful payload. You can probably do it easily if you don't put anything in it, but with a useful payload, that would be amazing. And in the comments, we need. Oh,
my club is doing about 10.
anyone speak Martian? Anyone quite sure what he said then? No, no. Oh, Harrison L3 emerging. Yes, I saw that as well. Above and beyond saying we need a UAV. You're breaking up, Nicola. We're breaking up. We're moving on. We're moving on. We're moving away from you, heading towards Bruce. Bruce, what have you got on your table?
Doing a bit of flight controller tuning for this week.
Excellent. Good, good, yeah. Well, that's what you need. That's what you need. That's what you need with INAV, mate.
Is
No, so
that
how'd you play, mate? To knock it into shape, terrible. Just more of the same. I've just done a video on situational awareness for people flying beyond visual line of sight FPV, showing how actually when you crunch the numbers, we've got better situational awareness than people sitting in the cockpit of an airplane, and that's why real planes collide and models in real planes don't.
Oh, okay, well that's all right then. I'm glad you.
The regulators will be pleased as punch at this video. I've called all sorts of names.
Bruce is pushing the boundaries.
I'm breaking them.
Oh, dear man. And Luke, when do you fly back? When do you fly back down here, mate? Oh, he's gone. Luke is in Barcelona or somewhere like that, and he should be flying back soon. I was just wondering when that's all right.
Party Island,
Yeah, very, very keen to get home. This Europe place, it can stay here. Africa is much better, less people. But I have to head back to another city anyways in South Africa.
Yeah. When are you coming back? You're back
tomorrow, and then directly back to Uganda and Tanzania, and a little bit of Cameroon.
Okay, all right, good. So we don't have to tune anything for a while then. That's good.
No,
there are more dangerous creatures in Brussels than in Africa, isn't there?
There's what, say?
There are more dangerous creatures in Brussels than in Africa.
Yeah, two-legged creatures, yeah.
Yeah, lots of them. Cool. And Louis, what have you got on your build table after your sumptuous supper last week?
Just a small ESC that I have to start putting plugs on this. And perhaps the biggest news is Aircopter is about to go finally to release 3.6 later this week or next week. So we, as usual, we'll be doing a soft launch of the release version. We've had good response from the community on Aircopter, and no major stopping blocks. So we'll be having Aircopter 3.6 release very soon.
Excellent, good. All right. So with that, then, and I do have to get that gavel.
Shame,
I will ask.
Gary, Sam, should we ask about you? What's up with you, Gary? What's happening in your life?
No one ever talks about my life. I'm just they never ask. They never ask, Luke. They never ask. And
well, I'm asking you now, Gary. What's going on in your life?
Which particular bit are you referring to? You're referring to the car that I managed to get stolen in Durban on Saturday, or are you referring to the? I took the school group. I took the school group to a Lego robotics competition. We were there about 10 minutes, and then somebody comes into the venue and said to me, "Were you driving an Avanza?" And I thought that the "were you" part was a bit of a clue. And yes, we said we were there 10 minutes and the car was nicked. Next weekend, I will be going up to Tanzania. So next week's one of this will be from... Yeah, it's not far. It can't be. It's Africa. It's like you. When the tide's out, you can walk across to Australia. That sort of a thing. Must be. So I'll be up there for the Lake Victoria Challenge, which is next week. I don't know, sometime soon. There's an aeroplane going to take me up there, something like that. And yeah, so next Tuesday will be from Lake Victoria, which will be
live from Lake Victoria. That's great.
Live from Lake Victoria.
I might be able to join you in studio then.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. All right, mine's I'll send you the lat long. So that'll be quite interesting to see what they there'll be plenty of VTOLs and eVTOLs there, part of the competition. But the actual competition is next year. Sorry, Louis.
Sorry, you're going to Lake Victoria and you don't take an Ardu boat or Ardu sailboat? Come on.
Well, I haven't got one. Well, yes, I could do that with. I live on a lake, so I should have something like that, but I don't. But I don't. So anyway, you pulled all the secrets out of me there, Luke. You pulled all the secrets out. I'm going to say now, because it's very late and we should be cracking on. Thank you very, very much indeed, Nick, for taking the flack from us and answering very well, which that's rather annoying, really. Very on message. But so well done to you, and we'll look forward on the 21st to see the launch of the Aviary project. In fact, what will we see?
If anyone here is in London on the 21st, please do reach out, and we'd be more than happy to save you a seat.
That's very cool. And might we see it on? Will you have it online on a YouTube channel, anything like that, for those of us overseas?
Unfortunately, no. Not as we speak. There may be some video after the fact. We'll have to see what we can get hold of.
Excellent. And you're being asked to be returned by the audience. They're asking us to have you back, so we must have you back. We'll have you back after the our audience of one or two after your launch, and we'll hear how that went, I think, and what your current thoughts and all that sort of thing is. And
definitely.
With that, I will say, gentlemen, thanks very much. Luke, I'll see you soon. Dear viewers, be safe wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing this week. If you're flying on the weekend, have a good one. And we'll see you again at 2100 GMT next week for a similar amount of nonsense, really. So thanks very much. Safe flight back, Luke. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.